go. Welcome to the College Founder, a podcast where we interview young founders and co-founders about their impressive work in the startup world. I'm Colin Sosha,
And I'm Hazel Shribu.
and we are the hosts of this episode. We are both freshmen at the University of Michigan and members of Upround, Michigan's premier student-run VC firm.
So if you're a future founder or co-founder or just looking to get started in the world of entrepreneurship, this podcast is definitely for you. Let's meet our first co-founder, Arjun Goglani. Arjun is the president of Upround and the co-founder of Uniflow.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on. As Hazel mentioned, I lead the organization of Upround as well as I founded Uniflow. I am a sophomore studying business and user experience at the University of Michigan, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, so to start us off, could you just give us your elevator pitch for Uniflow?
Yeah, so something that we found is that students heavily rely on luck to find their college campus communities. And during our research, we found 90% of students, when they're seniors, look back at their college experience and say, if only I knew about this, or if only I had done that. And that's really where Uniflow exists. Our goal is to centralize all the opportunities on the college campus or in the extracurricular ecosystem, and tell students how to join these opportunities and match them to the perfect ones for them. To really streamlining the education and higher education space for these college students.
That's great. Just one of my questions. What is your end goal with Uniflow? What's the main value behind Uniflow?
Yeah, so when I came to the University of Michigan as a freshman, I really wanted to get the most out of my college experience. Got hit with a nice bout of imposter syndrome the first few weeks. Didn't really feel like I was finding my community or connection. Through that, I put a lot of time into figuring out, what is right for me? How do I make the most of this experience? And what sort of organizations should I join or opportunities I should pursue? And I was lucky enough to get into organizations like Upround, or a consulting group I was a part of, or a fellowship at the university called the Entrepreneurship Leadership Program. But I knew a lot of other people who weren't sort of as fortunate or didn't put as much effort or thought or really going through this hundreds of different pieces of information or websites to find and build a perfect college experience. So really that personal empowerment that a student gets, that's extremely fulfilling for our team to see students use the platform and get that and understand what their college experience is going to be like. So our end goal is really to empower as many college students as possible to make the most out of the education experience. And on the more business level is really to be at every major institution, whether that be a high school, community college, or higher education university like University of Michigan, all around the country and hopefully around the world.
Yeah, so obviously the main goal behind Uniflow, I'd imagine, is to establish a network. So how did you build your network to market Uniflow?
Yeah, so that's really, there's a lot of different networks sort of that I've developed at whether the university and then also as a business that we've been able to develop to actually get clients and grow. So when I often talk to students that are like, oh yeah, I have this business idea, but how do I find the people to start it with? I don't know if that really got exactly your question, but I'll sort of answer it. Is that I personally met my co-founders and the people who work on the business in a student organization. So it's very fitting that is what we're trying to empower. And on the business side, it's really about the art of making people promoters. So whenever we would go to different universities or go to different sort of investors, it was about making them feel very, very included and as one of the people to shape the platform. So since we have so many different people come together to make Uniflow what it is, i.e. all the data that's on the platform, all the clubs, opportunities have to be filled out by people. We've taken a very similar approach to our business, in which we try to bring sort of everyone together to create these outcomes. And for me, that was particularly finding these people in these student organizations, and that's really why we're a mission-focused company.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your team. Like, what does each person contribute?
Yeah, so we're a fairly large team for sort of us being a student startup. So I handle most of the product, whether that be design, product operations, how we go from ideation to actual development of the product and deployment. My co-founder Rahul handles the sales and more business administration, whether that be financial modeling or strategy. And we have a co-founder called his name is Andrew, and he sort of the brains behind the machine. He does all of the coding and manages our development team. And on that development team, we have a variety of different students, whether they be seniors at Michigan. We have software at USC working for us. We run 6 people on the development team, and a few other people on the sales administration side. So overall, we're 9 people, and really specializing on whether that be the selling side or the product side or student side. But ultimately, we're all student run. There's no we haven't outsourced anything. There's no sort of people we've been able to hire, and that's something that not because we didn't want to hire full-time people, it's because we couldn't afford to, and we can't afford to. So definitely, it's a team of 9 students, and I love every one of them.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really incredible, but also very time consuming. So, how do you handle and balance Uniflow with being a student and your other time commitments in Michigan?
To be honest, I know my parents would be happy about this, but the pass-fail grading system really helps. Definitely allows myself to make and the rest of our team to make time for it. But I think there's a lot to be said about if you look at a 40-hour work week of a software developer or someone in a startup, not in a startup, but a company. 20 hours of the week are about talking about what you're going to do. And not actually doing it. So, our goal and sort of the processes we've developed are really to take that out of there and really have it focused on, every sort of minute we spend is well spent. And you can get very, very far when you do that. As well as just really having this listing of priorities of like, all right, when I wake up at 9 a.m. I get to work. What am I working on first? And having clear set priorities of like trying to make sure you're doing. I use the 80-20 rule as much as I can, right? So the 80-20 rule, for those of you who are not familiar, is you get 80% of the value for 20% of the effort, right? So if I can do that in everything I work on, whether that be Upround or Uniflow or schoolwork, I'm setting not. I still have 60% of my effort, and I'm getting 80% everywhere else. So, really trying to adopt that principle as much as possible, and making sure I have a clear understanding of what priorities are every day.
So you talk about the 80-20 rule, and I'm just wondering what motivates you to keep that running? What motivates you to keep, I guess, pushing through that process?
Yeah, so it's something we practice a lot at Uniflow is really creating great experiences and great impact on other people, right? So funny enough, and this is why typically my schoolwork comes last, because I feel like it's not a great experience for me or not really doing much for other people. But on Uniflow, I know like sort of the time and effort I put in is going to concretely impact a lot of people, and I know like a lot of students that directly peered with use the platform. And that's super exciting and encouraging, for me, because I'm able to see the direct impact of my effort. On Upround is being able to get the best talent on campus, like both of you. It's really exciting to see sort of your journeys flourish, and that's what keeps you motivated. So, whether that throughout the different things and responsibilities I have, it's being able to see the direct impact, and typically that impact on people is what motivates me. And when it doesn't have that, doesn't really get me up in the morning.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Also, so Michigan, how there are a bunch of resources for student entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in general at
Mhm.
Michigan. So, what are some of the resources that you've used personally in your journey with Uniflow or your co-founders as well, to get the most out of your time in Michigan with regards to your startup?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of resources, but I think our fundamental thesis at Upround is that they're not well used and well utilized, and that's why self plug is that we put a lot of effort into building resources, whether that be funding, accelerating, or sort of introductions to investors. So not through my university on the bus, but we've been able to largely do it without any university help. They haven't helped us or given us a dime, and it's primarily the the willingness of the alumni network, or whether that be the actual, the people we talk to who are from or have a relationship with the University of Michigan, that's helped us, right? So not necessarily the university itself, because a lot of our thesis at Upround is that those resources are fundamentally broken, and I'll keep saying it. But being the fact is that we are students, and we are students at the University of Michigan, is what has helped us move forward. But largely it's been from our own effort, and not anyone else helping us.
Amazing. So I just want to pedal back a little bit. For our listeners, Arjun is part of the business school at Michigan, and a main, I guess, concept with a lot of these people is that they're trying to go into careers that don't necessarily benefit everyone, or they just benefit a small amount of people. What got you interested in entrepreneurship and this idea of helping as many people as you possibly can?
Yeah, so there's one selfish answer and one selfless answer. I'll start with the selfish answer, right? Is that like you see a lot of people, millions of people who go into great careers, but that's it. Like they live fairly boring but moderately successful lives. They retire a millionaire and they're great. They did investment banking for 5 years, went into another career. X, Y, and Z. I just find that very, very boring, because I feel like to really be someone impactful and someone to have an interesting life, you have to do your own thing. You have to be a part of it. Be an entrepreneur, right? Because that is really how you break out of this cycle of of corporate America, right? And make yourself known. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I've lucky enough to sort of in high school build a product out of my desire to just fix a problem. Nothing philosophical or anything. Not like I was like trying to change the world with what I was building, but I just wanted to build something that solved the problem I had, published it, and I saw it solved that problem for other people. And that that startup and that product is a story for another day. But seeing that enforcement of like build, publish, and and have that impact people really, really early on in my education was enough of indication to be like investment banking, consulting, not necessarily for me, and other paths seemed a lot more viable. I know the path may not always be easy because it's hard to say what are you going to do after college. I'm going to do entrepreneurship, but it's one that requires a high level of conviction and something I think is right for me.
Interesting. So you talk a lot about the people that you are impacting directly and indirectly. Who is
Mm-hmm.
currently using your platform, the Uniflow platform?
Yeah, so we're lucky enough to really have a lot of great customers. Our most visible customer, Michigan Ross, uses the platform, as well as USC, University of Florida, Penn State, several of the community colleges out in Los Angeles, and we're growing to 30 plus colleges and universities by January. So, number of different, right now, primarily in business schools and community colleges, but hope to sort of expand to the broader full universities and beyond the coming years.
Yeah, and then so I don't know, are either of your parents or anyone in your family like pursuing entrepreneurship or have pursued entrepreneurship in the past?
Yes, I get a lot of my inspiration from my brother. So when he was in 7th grade, like would sell like different golf club covers. I don't know if you're familiar with those are, but like there's like they're like collectible items. So he would sell them on eBay, and he would just like keep like finding inefficiencies and things, and just keep selling them on eBay. And he ended up selling Rolex watches when he was a senior in high school, and then ended up graduating onto real estate when he was older. Long story short, I would always just see him sort of do his own thing, be entrepreneurial. Well, I would say it's a different flavor of entrepreneurship that sort of I've been practicing, but seeing sort of him not ever go into a traditional job and be able to do things on his own and have that passion to do it and have the sort of conviction to do it was a great example, and sort of why I thought it was like almost commonplace to start a business, right? It's like you can't like what is it to not do that, right? Because there's no sort of typical archetype. That being said, my sister ended up she worked now in a hedge fund, so she had a very traditional path, but she's still entrepreneurial. She used to fix phones when she was in high school, and and started a tutoring business when she was in college. So yeah, there's I think everyone sort of has that streak, my family, and to me, in a large part, I've looked up to my brother, so that's definitely helped.
This is a bit of like a hypothetical question, but how do you think your career choice or your path in entrepreneurship would have changed if it weren't for having like those mentors, like your siblings as those mentors for you?
I have no idea. I
Yeah,
think
that's totally fine.
for me, I think you know I've done a lot of safe entrepreneurship. Really, Uniflow is something that is growing, but definitely not mid big or really a high growth startup at this point. So don't want to speak too much about like, oh, I could never imagine what I would be doing without it, because I feel like I'm very very early on my entrepreneurial journey, and I think I'd have a better answer for you in like 5 years. But I know I
I'll
definitely
take
would.
you up on that for sure.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please. We can make an amendment to this episode.
Yeah.
But really, probably wouldn't be doing. Usually wouldn't exist if I didn't have those examples. As a short answer.
Interesting. So, as a co-founder as well, I think one of the toughest, I guess, the toughest pieces in creating a company or starting a business is the beginning steps. So, creating your
Mhm.
business model and just working through all of that. What was the first moment in Uniflow where you were like, this all paid off? All of the hard work paid off.
Ooh, that is a good question. It was definitely when we were our first customer and we onboarded them, and just like seeing the analytics and seeing like, oh, there's 2,000 people on the site right now, which is pretty interesting, because it's not just visitors, but people who are actively interacting and making thousands of different impressions throughout the hour. So that was definitely very very cool, and seeing my school, Michigan Ross's name at the top. Was definitely very very exciting, and I was like, all right, we did something. For this all we
Yeah.
fold up tomorrow. There's something that happened that came from this, and there was some value delivered. It was definitely that point, and we almost died in May. So I'll give you sort of the long story of Uniflow. It was I came up with the idea, and ideas are one of the philosophies I hold very deeply. Is ideas are super super cheap. So I don't really care who has the idea, but who executes on it. Um, so the idea, I got the idea in December during like a sort of a pitch competition of another business. Um, you know, wanted to found it and wanted to sort of make this overall encompassing campus engagement solution. We built it in May. It was horrible. The platform was horrible, and we ended up restarting again and focusing specifically on club fairs as a start to actually get to our end of goal. So during that point in which we had built this platform that didn't really work, I thought, okay, we're done, right? And to go from that sort of that pit all the way to actually deploying a product, and whether it may be a different product, but it still does a lot of the same goals of connecting people. It was definitely very, very rewarding. It sort of gives you that. I just want to keep doing this and keep, making, going to greater heights.
It's great. Yeah. Um, yeah. So lastly, I guess, how did you or how did Upround help you in your journey with Uniflow, if at all?
Oh, of course. I think the biggest thing that I've gotten out of Upround is like how to actually lead people. In student organizations, it's a very tricky balance because you have people who care, but you also have people that it's not their main thing. In startups, oftentimes you have a good amount of people that really prioritize the startup, and in schoolwork, you have a lot of people who really prioritize the school. Student organizations, it's a lot. It takes a very particular type of person to be really, really motivated and full force into it. So leading, people and getting them to sort of get to this position of that, they prioritize Upround, and they put their best foot forward, because we do a lot of our work is facing outwards to industry leaders or people who are in firms or startup companies, in which not responding for 72 hours because you had a midterm is not really an answer. It's not really acceptable. So that is what I learned the most of, is calm and sort of convincing leadership instead of forceful leadership. Because for a long time I didn't really necessarily have position of authority position. It's not until recently I really became president, and being able to lead without a title and sort of tell people, hey, like here's where we need to go, really helped me in Uniflow and making strategic decisions and getting people on the same page, and sort of I would say ironing out my edges, right? Because sort of um, knowing how to deliver bad news or knowing when it's your place to say something is really really important, and knowing when it's sort of the world to knock someone else down instead of you. So that's what I learned from Upround, and then also being able to know about venture capital and how VC works was super helpful because a lot of people think you start a business and you go raise money for it, but as I learned in Upround, that's maybe not the case for certain businesses that cannot really 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 grow. So like in venture capital, you're expected to 10x the return on any investment, right? So Uniflow, who we raised from or raising from, we want people who want maybe 2x or 3x their investments. That's what we reasonably can do. And knowing who to really go after was super important when we built our business. So whether that be the leadership component or the nuts and bolts of VC fundraising or how to run a startup, I really couldn't have done it without Upround, and that's why I like to give back to the organization and continue to serve it.
Interesting. And just kind of as a concluding question for our listeners, what do you recommend, or where do you recommend our users or listeners go to learn more about entrepreneurship and or venture capital?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I find is that learning from stories and other people's paths is the best way. So anywhere you can find an entrepreneur story or a VC story, and you can make that engaging, whether that be products that you'd like to use or things that you want to start, and hearing who has come before you is really important. So my advice is don't take an entrepreneurship class, read an entrepreneurship book. You'll learn more, because you're the best, the top entrepreneurs in the world are giving you their knowledge in their book, so read it. And definitely be sort of curious about how much you can get from a YouTube article or YouTube video, because oftentimes someone's selling you sort of an entrepreneur startup guide for $24, that's going to be 300 pages, could be less valuable than a 5-minute TED Talk. So definitely value your time, and listen to other entrepreneur stories if I had to give any advice to other entrepreneurs.
That's great advice, Arjun. Thank you very much. Quick reminder to all of the University of Michigan students listening, Upround applications are open for winter semester. Go to upround.vc to join our team.
Thank you so much for being our first ever guest on the College Founder. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
It seems that we've reached the end of our episode, but tune in next week as we will be interviewing more founders and learning more about venture capital on the College Founder. Thank you very much.